Absolutely.
Okay, let's do it. Erica, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
I can't wait to chat with you and your audience.
Me too. So let's begin our journey with 5 years ago. This pandemic began. We were trying to figure it out. It's hard to believe. But how did you make it through that time period? How did it change you and affect the way that you live your life and do things today?
Wow, what a great question. I actually was just recently watching a video that my son had recorded during COVID. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that family is everything. And that's if everything else in the world changes and shifts and goes away, that's all you got left. And so that has been my North Star.
So, talk to me a little bit about exactly what you do right now in 2025. And to do that, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of kids, grade schoolers, career day, sixth graders. Kid in the back of the room is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
Okay, so I lead two lives, actually, probably three.
Okay.
Number one, I am the executive director of a nonprofit that helps kids with cancer and their families. It is called the Pinky Swear Foundation. So that's what I do most days.
Yeah.
Secondly, I'm an author and I wrote a book about my own cancer journey 5, 6 years ago. And then the third thing is I'm a full-time mom to two kids. So I got three full-time jobs.
Okay. So, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What was your dream?
Actually, my dream was to either be a florist or an author. So I've gotten halfway there.
What was it about being a florist?
Interestingly, I loved flowers and I loved looking at them. I loved arranging them. I loved, thinking about being a business owner. And then one day my mom said, if you become a florist, you might end up really resenting and getting tired of flowers. And I was like,
Oh.
oh, I never want that to happen.
Yeah.
So I dropped that dream and, today I'm an author.
I worked in a grocery store when I was younger. I was in the produce section, and my best friend at the time, he worked in the floral section and absolutely loved it. And
Really?
for a guy, that would make sense because then he would get a discount. He would know what to pick. And there's nothing better probably than a guy that understands the floral world, right?
Yes.
So that's it. Maybe that's the secret to young guys if they really want to figure things out is to work in a floral department.
I mean, that guy must be a keeper
Yeah,
because
yeah.
whoever he's married to or dating is a very lucky woman.
Well, it's interesting. His name's Mark, and he's actually my son's godfather. It's interesting because he lost his wife to cancer about 7 years ago. It was really sudden. And speaking of cancer, he's actually at a point now where he's going to get remarried. But I every time I hear about people really fighting for cancer and awareness and everything that goes into what that is, I think about him because of how sudden it was that he lost his wife. So my question to you is this: before we get to that, what were these foundational elements that were implanted into you early on to be, so much into family, to be a writer, to have a nonprofit? What were those seeds planted into you early on?
I think it was, if I'm being honest, it was all my mother. She was such a guiding force. She was always giving to other people. She was a leader in her own quiet way. She was a really quiet leader, but a very powerful one. And she fought hard for her community and she fought hard for the people that she worked with that were sometimes, in tough situations. And she always believed in me, right? That I could do and be more. And, she also, I would say, was in a cancer battle for a part of her life as well. And so I just felt like I always had a deeper perspective. I felt like I knew more than most, and not in an arrogant way, but just that the superficial things about life don't matter. What matters is people and the experiences you have. And so those were the foundational things that I learned from a very, very, very young age. We didn't grow up with a lot, but we had a lot of other blessings and benefits. And that was like ingrained with me from the beginning.
Are you from Minnesota? Was that where you were born and raised?
No, I was born and raised in Long Island, New York. And I say that with just a little bit of a New York
Right,
accent.
I noticed that. My dad was actually raised in Massapequa.
Oh yeah, I know where that is. And I grew up in Hauppauge, New York. So that's how you know it's true that I could pronounce Hauppauge and Massapequa.
You know, I went and saw Seinfeld in January, and a bunch of people leaving the show were talking about Massapequa. And I was like, "What are you talking about? That's where Seinfeld was from." I didn't realize that. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild.
Yeah.
Um, so let me ask you this. Let's get into, your cancer battle and why you're an advocate. Let's dive into that part of your life. When did that happen? When did you get diagnosed, and kind of what was that journey to the nonprofit and the work you're doing now?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, from an early age, I had decided that, helping others was really just a foundational part of who I am. And I had a long career in human resources and some other things, finance. But actually, I decided to quit one day. I said, there's a world bigger than myself. This was years after my mom passed away. Because again, I felt like just having a job wasn't my life purpose.
Yeah.
And so I found this job at Pinky Swear Foundation in a nonprofit space. And in my very first year of this role, I was diagnosed myself with breast cancer.
Wow.
So, I was helping kids with cancer at the same time I was in my own cancer battle. I was surrounded by it. But what I was also surrounded by was the power of direct support to others. So, in my day job, Pinky Swear Foundation, we give direct support to families with finances, like we pay their bills. And when I was myself diagnosed, there was another woman at work who actually helped me tremendously. She knew that I was about to have a very large surgery. It's called a double mastectomy, where they, sort of remove your breasts. Um, and she offered that she herself had had a similar surgery. And she offered to show me what that would look like today after she had been healed and recovered. And I'll tell you, Joe, that changed everything for
Wow.
me. It was really powerful. For someone to be so vulnerable,
Yep.
to show me, kind of a very intimate part of themselves. And I thought how rare that is. And I decided then and there that I wanted to do that for other women. Again, at that direct support, I wanted to be a resource. I can't cure cancer, wish I could, but there are things I can do. I'm very action oriented. So this book is that. It is showing women what it's going to look like before, during, and after, and really exposing all the emotions around that too.
Since you've kind of been at this doorstep of mortality for so long, and you talked a lot about, that human connection, maybe that was a cure in itself for her to do that for you. Part of it was you, a regenerative part of one person saying, "Let's do it." Does she know that she did that for you?
Yeah. Yeah. She's
Okay.
still a good friend of mine.
That's
Yeah. And
cool.
at the time, I didn't know her very well.
Yeah. Well,
Really beautiful, really supportive.
so there was a jazz singer in Kansas City. Her name was Molly Hammer, and she had cancer and it went into remission. And I remember interviewing her, and she had talked about how she started saying yes to everything. She stopped saying no. That was a big revelation. Unfortunately, she passed in 2020. It came back. But she has been a really big beacon, not only in the jazz community, but in the Kansas City community. She's very close, and she had just a wonderful sense of humor, just a wonderful spirit. And it lives on, but I do remember every time I think about people that have survived these mortal periods of their lives of looking at life in the next place. She's been very inspirational in that fact. So I'm curious, what do you do the day you find out that it's either in remission or it's gone? What's the celebration like? What's the relief?
It is, it is like the greatest lift off of your shoulder. It's like taking off a weighted backpack that you didn't know you've been carrying around for years.
Yeah.
That is how significant it is. You feel lighter and you feel stronger almost immediately. And I would say that has been the biggest gift is obviously the physical healing. You want to have that cancer gone, you want to have it in remission, but is it a freedom mentally from that burden, that anxiety? You know, uh, Sometimes we call it scanxiety, where you're always looking around you to say, is that ache or pain cancer? Or is it spreading? Or is it coming back? And once you're cured and once you do the hard work, it's hard work to do that road to remission. Once you do the hard work, the freedom that comes mentally is priceless.
So how hard was it to write about this? I know when people write biographies and memoirs, to relive things that can be traumatic is almost itself just as bad or close to as bad as what you lived through. How did you do that? And then how good did it feel to actually see that book in your hand? after it all was said and done.
Yeah. And then to be honest, I didn't set out as soon as I was diagnosed to write a book about it.
Sure.
Right. But what I did at the time was I took the advice of actually a former medical professional who said, you really need to journal to help yourself through. And I was like, ugh, I rolled my eyes. When he first gave me that advice, I was like, I'm dealing with a health emergency and you're telling me to just journal to get it better. And so, I fought it and I fought it, but I was really struggling, Joe. And so I tried it. Every night I would just write in this journal and I would write just junk, to be honest, like whatever was on my mind.
Yeah.
And then I put that journal away once I was in remission. But a few years later, I would say lots of women kept coming to me, strangers, friends of friends, and they'd be like, hey, I heard you had this journey. Can you tell me what it's like? Can you give me some advice? It happened so many times that I was like, huh, I wonder if I should like write a book to get it to more people.
Yeah.
So in that process, I was like, where do I start? And I started with that journal. Oh man, talk about revealing. I hadn't opened it in years, and when I looked at it, I was like, "Oh my goodness." I didn't remember
Yeah.
the depth of the challenges I was going through, but I many parts of the book and the parts that people like the most in the book are direct entries from that journal.
Yeah.
And super vulnerable to share that, but it is people's favorite part because it is the most authentic and the most raw.
Well, that's the backbone of any good literature, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, is the fact that it hits to the bone. That's the Oscar moment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And those are the parts that when I would wake up every morning around 5 a.m. and write before the kids woke up. That's how I did it. Every day I wrote a little bit. And there were times like I would almost read sections that I was typing up, or just simply typing up and get goosebumps or heart palpitations
yeah.
because I thought this is really sharing some raw stuff. But I felt also called to do that because if I'd been through it, other people had too.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt like this call to do something, to take action and to take that risk.
So ultimately, at the end of the day, with everything that you've gone through from the cancer and otherwise, just living life on this planet can be difficult. Who has been that inspiration? Who has been that heroic force for you to do all of this?
I will tell you the many, many kids that I have worked with that have had cancer themselves over the years. Those are my just like a sprinkling of stars in the universe that keep guiding me. You know, um, while I was in my corporate career, I was volunteering at a summer camp for children with cancer. I was a sleepaway camp counselor. I would take time off of work to do that. And there are so many kids that I met that were far braver, far stronger than any adult, frankly. Many of those kids I've loved and lost. Several of those kids are alive today and friends with me now. And I would say those are continue to be an inspiration. The sort of the depth of maturity when you see a child who's facing their own mortality and how they get through that, it is like a shot in the arm of perspective, and suddenly all your problems disappear and you know what's important in life. And I find that really inspiring and really motivating.
And I think those testaments to that young spirit of the kids just shows how strong we can be as humans. Like the other day, we started watching a show that David Blaine, the magician, he's going around the world and he's going to all these different places. And the first show was in Brazil, and there's these people doing crazy things, like literally like walking on a tightrope across an entire populated city, no problem, just going and doing it, diving off unbelievable heights of bridges. And I keep thinking, at the end of the day, we human beings are way, way more capable of the sedentary existence that America puts in our brains. We are way just engineered for things that are above and beyond.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. The things I have seen, and I would say almost the miracles that I have witnessed of just like the strength of the human spirit when faced with unsurmountable challenges, or when you would expect people to crumble in fear, like whether it's crossing, a city on a tightrope, or it's facing your own, chemotherapy as a 9-year-old. I have seen miracles and I have seen the power of the human spirit, and it's all up here. That's actually my takeaway.
There was a guy the other day that was rescued at sea after like 3 months, and I was like, wow, how did he do that? Like he was just in the middle of the sea, and I think it was close to 2 or 3 months. And it's like we've seen the movies, we've seen how that works. It's crazy, you
It
know.
is. It is. A
Um,
lot of people say, "How did you do it?" Or how did you do it? And the answer is it was one moment at a time, one day at a time. And I
yeah.
suspect that's how that person got through it.
Yeah. Speaking of kids in hospitals fighting cancer, we talked before we got on here, kind of mused about sports and the Vikings and the Chiefs. The last thing that Taylor Swift did when she came to Kansas City, one of the last games, she snuck into Children's Mercy Hospital
Yes.
and no one really knew. So for all of the people out there that have things to say about her moral fortitude and dexterity as a human and where her heart is, there you go.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was so thrilled to see her using the power of her platform
Yep.
quietly, right?
Yep.
Quietly, not publicly, at the hospital for
Yep.
children with cancer. I mean, talk about um, a true leader
Yeah.
and using, her power to just inspire others. I'm a
Yeah.
huge Swiftie, by the way. I'm a huge Swiftie.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen the movie on Netflix. I've looked into her, maybe a little bit of a bias because of the Kansas City connection, but I've never felt like there's anything about her that's fake, that's disingenuous, that's
Correct.
doing it for the wrong reasons. Because there's people that I would talk to after like a Buffalo Bills loss from Buffalo, and we're like, "Are you guys okay?" And we're like, "Yeah, everything's fine. We don't hate the Chiefs. We just don't like Taylor Swift." It's like, what are you talking about? How did she get the onus? It's
I
weird.
know.
It's
And
just
it's really funny. I listened to all Taylor Swift where I was writing my book. I actually give her a shout out in the acknowledgement section of my book, just
yeah,
because I thought her music was an inspiration to be authentic. I mean,
sure.
talk about, again, her lyrics expose a lot of things about her and her struggles. And I found that really inspiring. She gets a shout out in the acknowledgement section of my book.
So speaking of people, inspirational people on the planet, if you could meet one person alive today, spend some time with them, someone that would help you on your journey, who would that be?
Is it too cheap to say it would be Taylor Swift?
No, that was kind of the natural baton toss.
Yeah, I was doing some work with my daughter and her teenage friends. We were at an event, and the icebreaker was, "What celebrity would you want to have dinner with?" And both my daughter and I answered Taylor Swift.
There you
So this
go.
is real.
Yeah, it can happen. It can totally happen. So, how do you balance this life of being a mother, working the nonprofit, writing, being an advocate? Because that's deep stuff. When you have to walk into that world that you've been through before and kind of recreate that reality, but you also have a soul. How do you balance all of this every day to motivate yourself to do it at the best of your abilities?
Yeah, I would say there's two things. One is positive, one is sort of a block and tackle. The block and tackle is I keep out all the noise. I mean, totally honest. There's a lot of uncertainty and change and problems in the world. I tend to really selectively choose the media I consume. I don't spend a lot of time on TV, radio, blogs, podcasts. I mean, outside, in the political space, right?
Sure.
Because I just think it's really hard for me to then hold all those emotions, right? I do tend to embody a lot of it. And so that's kind of the block and tackle. But positively, I'm really clear about my priorities. I do get up early and I focus on my book. Then I focus on my kids, and I focus on my work, and then I rinse and repeat. And those are like, I'm super clear on what's important to me, and I have to block out the noise of everything else.
I've had to really go on political digital detox.
Yeah.
Like sent like a month ago. I was just listening to a memoir, an essay from the author of the movie. Remember the movie Awakenings?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I can't remember his name right now, but he had a cancer that really went aggressive in his 80s, and he was talking about what he was going to do in the last 6 months or so of his life. And the first thing he did is he cut himself off from news and things that weren't going to help him. Not that he didn't care about climate change and
Right.
things that were imminent for human beings, but it was like it was time. He walked his life. He's not going to get mired in the muck anymore. And I
Right.
think we would all be benefited psychologically by taking a big step back from this clown show because it's not doing any good for anybody.
No. And I separate things I can control and things I can't control,
Yeah,
right? And those are some of the things I can't control right now. I can do other things. I could support people in my community. I can make sure I vote or whatever.
yeah,
But there's things I can't control, and I'm really clear about those boundaries.
yeah. So let's say you have a dream tonight and you run into that version of you before you get cancer, before you knew your life was going to be altered, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've accumulated. What would you tell that young version of you right now?
I would tell her two things. Number one, I would say trust the process, right? I mean, having a cancer journey is like walking down a very pitch black tunnel and still having to step forward every single day. And I think there's an element of just trust it's going to be okay and trust yourself and trust others, right? You have to trust physicians, you have to trust nurses, but ultimately you have to trust yourself.
Yeah.
So I would tell her to trust the process. And then I would also say, you are not alone. You
Yes.
know, when I first got that phone call, I was alone in my office, with my head in my hands, getting these news from the doctor. And I felt so alone, but ultimately I wasn't,
Yeah.
right? Later on, there were this woman that came forth and helped me. There were lots of people in my community. There was other support systems that I didn't even realize that came out of the woodwork. And so I would say, trust the process and you are not alone. And really just hammer those two messages over and over, even when it gets hard.
So if you walked into a room of everybody that knows you from your nonprofit and you go to the beginning of the room and everybody's in there that knows you in a professional sense, and you can tell that room one fun thing, one fun story, one fun anecdote, something that would humanize you, they wouldn't realize, what fun thing would you tell that group of people?
Mm. When I was in graduate school, I was in South Africa on an exchange trip. And I was in South Africa, and there was an opportunity to jump off of a bridge in a bungee jump with everybody else doing it. And what did I do? I didn't do it. And the rest of the trip, I sat, and thought about what I had missed out on. And so I made the whole group of people. I was probably with like six or seven people. I made them at the end of the trip circle back. I faced my ultimate fear. I said I would never bungee jump. It was the highest bungee jump in all of the world. And I forced myself to do it.
Nice.
And it was the most frightening thing to have to, like, literally, you have to choose to jump off. And I don't know that I would ever do it again, but I'm so glad I did it. And it
Yeah.
was like, it was a mind game. And so, yeah, I have officially jumped off the highest bridge in the world in South Africa against all of my better judgment instincts.
Good for you, because that would have just been in your craw your whole life.
Yes.
My God.
I did not want to regret it. I did
No.
not want to regret. I regretted it as soon as we drove away from the bridge, and the whole trip I was like, "Oh, I gotta do it."
Yeah.
And then everybody encouraged me and allowed us to go back.
It's that Mark Twain quote. He didn't regret what he did with his life. He regretted what he didn't do. You know,
Correct.
it's that notion. So at the end of the day, of all of these things that you've accomplished and become in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Hmm. I would say I'm proudest of my children.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, and you asked me, is it hard? Um, you know, yes, it's hard to be a working mom. It's hard to get up early and work on my book on the side. But when I see them talking about the work that I do, and when I see the values that I'm trying to instill in them in secret ways, when they don't know that I'm watching, that is the most rewarding.
Yeah.
And it helps me believe that I'm doing the right things, even when it's very hard to make those tough choices.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone around you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Oh, I'm a visionary.
Yeah.
I'm an activator, and I love deeply.
So if anyone wants to get involved, reach out, get your book, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
They can go to my website. It is ericaneubertcampbell.com. And you can find out about the book, which is called The Mastectomy I Always Wanted. Intentionally curious title. You can also even learn about Pinky Swear Foundation there too.
Okay, excellent. Erica, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for your story and time.
Thank you so much, Joe. You are an incredible storyteller, listener, and with deep curiosity that I admire.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hello, friends.
Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.